continuing our examination of the Mumonkan during our Rohatsu Sesshin in Blue Mountain Zendo. We're on case 7. Joshu says, wash your bowls. Koan. Once a monk made a request of Master Joshu. I have just entered the monastery, he said. Please give me instruction, Master. Joshu said, have you had your breakfast? Yes, I have, replied the monk. Then Joshu said, wash your bowls. The monk had an insight. Mumon's commentary. Joshu opened his mouth and showed his gallbladder, and revealed his heart and liver. If this monk, hearing it, failed to grasp the truth, he would mistake a bell for a pot. Mumon's poem. Because it is so very clear, it takes longer to come to the realization. If you know at once candlelight is fire, the meal has long been cooked. Zen is so incredibly simple. There isn't much to it. In this simplicity, it can be perceived as quite profound and also missing a lot. Both things are true. It's great at what it does. And what it does is point us directly to our own true insight, our own direct realization or encounter with reality, which requires that the artificial barriers that we set up between self and other, and life and death, and right and wrong, have to drop away for us to have a direct realization or encounter with the seamless universe and beyond, the beyond we vocalize as everything after such a realization is said to be just the beginning. We spend the fullness of our life to our last breath practicing implementation, healthy implementation of that realization. The realization is really not so special or extraordinary. You don't even have to do Zen to have it. instance, in all of the great mystic traditions, will point you at the same realization. And there are many paths up the mountain, so Zen's not special. What Zen is good at, by being so simple, is that that's pretty much all it points at. It says, see for yourself. See it again. Work it again. Work it again. And work to implement it. That sums it up. It's so, because it's so very clear, Mumon's poem says, it takes longer to come to the realization. It's so simple where we can't believe it. We think it's got to be something more interesting, or more complex, or more entertaining, or more mystical. And we discover again and again, especially when we're doing koan work, that it's terribly ordinary. And that the very ordinary is it. Through session after session, year after year, decade after decade, we gain maturity in the way, which is we, in a healthy way, learn how to implement our realization. And then we could say we're starting to approximate wholeness. Maturity is the right word, and that's of more benefit to others than it is even to ourselves. And we start to live that our everyday lives as the enlightened life. Only you can drop the enlightened. Just our everyday life is it. We say things in Zen like chopping wood and carrying water. Before enlightenment, chopping wood and carrying water. Things that need doing. After so-called enlightenment, or realization, seeing into your own true nature, still chopping wood, carrying water. There's a shift in our attitude or our perspective. But the same things we were doing before, if we needed to chop wood and carry water, we still need to chop wood and carry water. Zen's so simple, we say things like, when you're hungry, prepare a meal. When you're tired, go to bed. When it's time for Zazen, put your butt down on the cushion. Before realization, you do those things. After realization, you do those things. No difference. Nothing special. But there's a shift in attitude after realization, and with maturity, it becomes more alive. It becomes more peaceful. We have more equanimity, peace of mind while chopping wood and carrying water. shoveling the snow, or sweeping the path. Same activities before and after this shift in perspective or attitude. There's another popular Zen saying that goes, before enlightenment, so-called enlightenment, mountains are mountains and rivers are rivers. Go hiking, there's a mountain, there's a river. Don't think anything of it. During enlightenment or realization, when the shift is happening and you're in the midst of the barriers have fallen away, and your ego really has taken such a back seat that it essentially disappears. At such a moment, which can seem like it lasts forever, we also say, a single thought can be 10,000 years. In that moment of breaking through the artificial barriers that separate things, just one thought is comparable to 10,000 years. Anyway, when the barriers are down, our own barriers, our own artificial barriers that we set up between self and other, this and that, right and wrong, life and death, when those barriers fall through practice or hitting a stone against bamboo and sweeping. When those barriers fall, we come to a place where we say, mountains are not mountains. Rivers are not rivers. We're blown away. And nothing is as it seemed before. Yet, after realization, the shift has happened, but you're not in exactly the same space. Again, mountains are mountains, rivers are rivers. But there's a difference. There's really no difference. Exactly the same mountain, exactly the same river, exactly the same person. But because there's a shift in perspective or attitude, even when you're not in the midst of it, you can't get rid of the fact that you saw the world this way. And there's a shift. And instead of mountain just being a big rock with a certain elevation, somehow you see forever, you see its aliveness. Instead of just seeing trees in the forest, you see standing people. And the river, just water flowing down hill, also becomes alive. Anyway, if you know at once the candlelight is fire, if you already know the mountains are, mountains, post-realization, rivers are rivers, the meal has long been cooked. In this time when the barriers fall away, artificial barriers we've set up between self and other in order to live a life, and ego requires it of us to say, who's me and who's that? And if you can't do that, you're psychotic, so it's good to have an ego. But when those barriers fall away and we're seeing things, frankly, clearly, a part of that shift is just a heart opening. You're in love with everything, and it feels like everything's in love with you. And in fact, it's the truth. Love's way overused. What do I mean by love? We all have our own definitions, but all I can do is point it the way anyway. There's a lot of love. And post this realization, even when the distinctions re-arise or reappear, because you've seen the world as it really is, without the artificial barriers, your great vow comes up. Shujo Muhenze Gondo. We vow to save, there's one translation, all beings. I like to put it this way. We vow to care for all beings, great and small, animate and inanimate. This becomes our great vow after such a shift. It should anyway. Because when the artificial barriers drop away and we see things clearly as they really are, there's no self and no other. So in the sense that we love ourselves or we love God or something like that, we love each other. We love our neighbor as ourselves because from that shift we know we're not really separate. A monk once asked Joshu, "I've entered the monastery." And he said, "You could probably come a long way. Heard about Zen Master Joshu. Lived around the same time as Rinzai. They even met each other. Very, very, very famous, as Rinzai was too. This really height of Zen around the 9th century in China, in the Tang Dynasty. People would travel many, 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 many leagues. Didn't have trains or airplanes or cars. Walking long, 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 long distances, months, to enter a monastery and be with a great master. So, this monk has traveled a long way. He's heard about Joshu's reputation. He's anxious to learn. I've entered the monastery. Master, please give me instruction. Zen is so simple, it is hard to see. Joshu gives instruction. Does exactly what he should do. He exemplifies host activity and says, "Must have been morning, have you had your breakfast?" So at once he's exemplifying host activity, and he's also, believe it or not, completely answering the petitioner's question. As I said before, when hungry, prepare a meal and eat. When tired, prepare your bed and sleep. When you hear the bell nothing I can do about it. I could shout! Swing the keisaku. Probably won't work. You have to find it for yourselves. And until then, you'll keep mistaking a bell for a pot. But when you see clearly, you'll understand immediately. It's not a pot, it's a bell. It was a bell all along. How come I didn't see it was a bell? I was walking around thinking it was a pot. The monk answers, "Oh, yeah, I had breakfast. Thank you. It's very kind of you to ask." Osho says, "Okay, you had breakfast. Wash your bowls." Second time around, a monk has an insight. Which is very nice. Now, if he had seen it the first time around, what would have it been? Joshu was so kind. It was as though he opened his mouth and showed his gallbladder, his heart, his liver, his kidneys, his intestines, his stomach. He showed everything, just gave it all up for the inquiring monk. Didn't hesitate, didn't explain, didn't instruct. Other than saying, "Have you had your breakfast?" It's so simple. And that's the extent of it, with the exception that if you have the realization, that's only the beginning. And we say, give yourself 2 or 3 decades to mature in the way. So what's another way to think about this maturity? The more mature you get, the more mature we get, the more alone you become. Now, people don't like to hear that. I don't like to hear that. There are 2 great fears we have in life: annihilation and abandonment. We're very afraid to let our ego even take a back seat, let alone disappear for a while in the vastness of the great void. And that's a fear of annihilation. That one for me wasn't so difficult. But maturity means that I also have to give up my fear of abandonment, and I'm still working on it. The height of maturity might be thought of in this way. If you were the only human being on this planet. Could you handle it? I actually use that as a kind of can opener to call myself forward along the path of maturity, is to imagine that no one else is here. Can I really just chop wood, carry water, do zazen, prepare a meal when necessary, prepare a bed when necessary, do what needs doing entirely alone? If I can imagine that and really take it in and let that be so, then I think that is a barometer of maturity. And the more mature you get, the more alone you get. I think it was Master Yakujo in another koan was asked, what is the pinnacle of Zen practice? And he responds, sitting alone atop a sublime peak. Where I'm at, just speaking for myself, is I might have some fear of dying. I think my ego would get all excited about the dying process. But I really am not afraid of death. But this being entirely alone business, still working on it. My ego, I can feel that clinging aspect of myself that says, no, I want someone to love me, and I want someone to love. I want someone out there. I don't want to have to take care of it all myself. Of course, when we are more mature in the way, and the barriers are more consistently down, or at least, maybe not down, but transparent, then the compensation is that you're entirely alone and you're never lonely. Entirely alone but never lonely, because you're seamless with the whole universe. We're taping, otherwise I would have said something else. So, we'll be entirely alone because there is no one else. The Diamond Sutra keeps saying there is really no human beings, no beings at all. Therefore, there's no beings to save. And the more mature we get, the more real that becomes. So the more alone we become, because we're seamless with the whole universe, which is quite a compensation, actually. But it takes a lot of maturity to walk in that space. I'm, for one, still working on it. So, I can imagine, having great peace of mind, living alone on an island, or or even in solitary confinement someplace, not a big hardship if I have great maturity. It would be possible to have a loving heart and not go crazy, even if no one else is around. And if I have company, what will we want to do? Somehow share the good news. I don't have to share the good news with the rocks and the trees and the moon and the stars and the deer and the fox, the snake and the rat. They all are living it. The birds, just living it. But my quote-unquote fellow human beings, most of you don't get it. So what makes quote-unquote a Zen master is this great vow of wanting to keep pointing at the moon. Look, 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 look. You say, well, there's the moon. No, no, really look. Don't mistake a bell for a pot. The other point here, I think, to be made is that people don't like to hear the maturity is learning how to be entirely alone. People also don't like to hear that true freedom is having no choice at all. None. People don't like to hear that. People would like to hear that with more freedom I have more choice. But it's just the opposite. The more mature we become, the more freedom we have to do what needs doing. Chop wood and carry water. Clean the toilet or cut the grass. Chop vegetables or eat a meal. Or wash our bowls. With a loving action. Not because it's a chore or has to be done or it's a responsibility. No, it's just the next thing that needs doing. If you were all alone, you would do naturally just the next thing that needs doing. When you were tired, you would do the next thing that needs doing. You'd prepare some kind of shelter and a bed. When you were hungry, you'd figure out how to prepare a meal. And if you needed to do something more than gathering and you had to hunt something, imagine the love and respect you would have for the life that you took. That's maturity. Would you have any complaints? Well, you don't have anybody to complain to. What are you going to complain about? Complaints go out the window. You're all alone. Who are you going to complain to? You still got to do what needs doing. Complete freedom is the freedom to do what's next. After breakfast, wash our bowls. Complete freedom if there's maturity. We've seen in an American Zen how even something so simple and so subtle and so profound can be egos are tricky. And this thing about not wanting to be alone is a big one. You've got to get past death, the idea that you're temporary and that you can't take your ego with you, and that the ego is truly dust. By the way, these scriptures talk about, and our purification talks about, these previous lives. And you might ask me, do I believe in previous lives? Well, somebody asked me, do you believe in reincarnation? I said, not really, but I believe in recycling. I've either never had a past life, because this ego certainly has never had a past life, or I've had all past lives and all future lives. All. Either none or all. I can go with either one. Different sides of the same coin. Therefore, in this lifetime, wherever we land in whatever circumstances, family of origin, time, culture, planet, we are kind of burdened, like a sponge. We pick up whatever the collective soil is where we pop out. You didn't make it happen. That's where you happen to land. This so-called composite ego identity landed either in the sand or really fertile soil or up on a craggy rock. Not your fault. But that's where we happen to land. So you deal with the karma of your circumstance, because that's what's dropped in our laps. We crunch the karma of the collective because we're all seamless with the collective. So in a sense, I was born after World War II, and yet I feel the collective responsibility of the genocide that happened in World War II. I feel it. So I have to crunch some of the woundedness to the collective, because I feel this affinity for the Jews and the Gypsies and the mentally deficient or disabled, and the gays who just got wiped out. The Russians, the Poles. There's a big wound, and we're all a part of healing it. Not just in Germany, of course, Cambodia, you name wherever the genocide is like a big wound in the collective unconscious. I'm going to Rwanda this year because there's another wound there. It's 20 years, exactly 20 years since the massacre and genocide there. Very fresh, much fresher wound than the one that happened 70 years ago. But when I've been in Auschwitz, boy, it doesn't seem like 70 years ago. You can still feel the wound. It's palpable. It's in the air. It's in the culture. It's in the buildings. It's in the people. It's weird. That's karma. We're still suffering the karma collectively. So it's our business to go through our own family of origin karma, but then the collective karma, and to keep crunching it masticating it and in that way kind of digesting and repairing. And I do it just because it's there to be done, like chopping wood and carrying water. It's just there to be done. So, in the role of so-called Zen master, I get up to here to talk to everybody, and I see people upstairs, and I'm working on my own shit, but I also watch you all working on your shit, and we're all doing some composting, and from time to time getting close or getting glimpses of the real world. It's a bell, not a pot. And it's easy to fall in love with everybody or be in love with everybody. But just saying, what a betrayal it would be if I were to hit on anyone here in some way that would serve my ego. And it would be so upside down, and if it were sexual, it would be incestuous. But if I were taking advantage of anybody for any reason to meet my ego, it would be so antithetical to what Joshu was doing here. So simple. It's hard to see, and unfortunately easy to get lost when our instincts for survival, ego keeps reasserting itself.